This is a presentation about the new outdoor classroom and natural dye garden at the Sunrise Waldorf School in Duncan, British Columbia. The North Star vision is to create outdoor gardens, gathering areas, and tended wild spaces that inspire the school community to have direct relationships with food production and with native ecosystems in order to engender recognition of interdependence and foster meaningful connection with ourselves, each other, and the natural world, both on campus and beyond in the greater community. To begin with, we'll just look at a brief introduction of creating the new student learning garden. We chose a space that was being unused between the big field and the parking lot that had some invasive Himalayan blackberry and Scotch broom, as well as some dumpsters. And a parent who had an excavator came and helped clear the area of the invasive weeds. And then we, by hand, with a lot of parent volunteer hours, cleared the edge of the parking lot of gravel and rocks. And using permaculture principles whenever possible, we used on-site resources. There was a pile of garbage concrete that we broke up by hand with a sledgehammer, and then we used that to make urbanite or retaining walls with the concrete pieces to outline where the paths would go and the garden beds. We also got donated cow manure and horse manure from local farms. And then we did a method of restoration agriculture by layering manure, straw to build up fertile soil where it was very compact and not very living. And then because it was fresh manure and we didn't want to grow weeds, we added cardboard on top to suppress weed growth. And then on top of the cardboard, put about 6 to 8 inches of fresh soil that didn't have weed seeds in it that was donated from a local nursery, Dinter Nursery. And the next photos are just showing the new student learning garden in use. The photo on the right here shows Class 3 for their agriculture unit grew staple crops of potatoes and buckwheat and wheat. And there's gourds and squash and corn growing. And on the left, there's an example of the Three Sisters, which is a type of companion planting done by indigenous peoples, combining squash that have big leaves and shade the soil to keep the moisture in, corn, which grows tall and provides a stalk for climbing pole beans to climb up, and then the beans themselves replenish nitrogen into the soil for the other plants. There's some examples of our fall harvest. On the right is a popcorn and some squash in the middle, and a blue Hopi corn for making masa flour on the left. And we started using a new farm stand selling fruits and vegetables and plant starts to help raise money to support the school garden in the long run. We also sold bouquets in the fall and spring and engaged with parent volunteers with a weekly gardening morning on Fridays, as well as occasional seasonal weekend volunteer days. So most of what we were looking at before was edibles, and this part is the Textile and Natural Dye Garden. We grew Hopi red dye amaranth and madder root, and madder, which the root is used for red dye, Japanese indigo on the right, and lots of marigold, which makes a beautiful yellow shade. There's grade 3 dyeing placemats with indigo and madder and marigold. And here's more examples of marigold and madder root. Interesting to see how different the shades come out on different materials, wool, cotton, and silk. And we also grew flax for fiber to show what, some of the fiber plants that provide material for cloth and as well as cotton. So these flowers are some cotton in bloom. And we really worked to create the outdoor learning experience to be integrated with curriculum in different ways. So the cotton flowers, we were just looking at grade 3 studies, fibers from around the world. And here's a sample drawing of the different parts of the life cycle of the cotton. Grade 3 also for their math curriculum studies volumes and so they make a seedling mix that all the other grades can use. And one of the parts of the art experience in Waldorf is wet on wet watercolor painting. And in kindergarten, they start with doing a single color at a time with the primary colors. And then eventually they're given two colors, primary colors at a time. And through a discovery and exploration, they find what happens when you combine primary colors. And eventually, through working with the primary colors, in middle school, they're skillful enough to make a whole rainbow or a color wheel, to be able to make all the colors with just using those three basic ones. And out of this idea, in combination with studying ancient Rome and mosaics in middle school, the idea of making a color wheel stained glass mosaic as part of the outdoor classroom was born. And I thought that it would be nice to include a compass rose so that we could line up north, south, east, and west. There was a lot of math involved in figuring out how much glass of each color we needed to order, looking at the area of a circle that was about 8 feet in diameter. And this is just showing that we have red to the south and the other colors to north, east, and west. And then this is looking again at the beginning of the garden, just choosing where the outdoor classroom space would be. The full space is about a 20-foot diameter circle. This is before we did any soil remediation. And here's where we're starting to build up the soil around the outer edges. And now just looking at how we actually created the stained glass mosaic. So I started at home working on the color wheel and learning how to do mosaic, and made the center 4 squares at home. And then we brought those into school and laid them out in the center of that space to become the outdoor classroom. And then we invited the middle school students to come and fill in all of the squares around the center 4. And there it is, about 8 feet in diameter, the color wheel, all stained glass, with the red pointing to the south and the other directions accordingly. So we then had to cut the cement edging off to create a circle. And to line up, we planted the dye garden around the mosaic, and we lined up the primary colors so that the plants that made red dyes, such as madder and Hopi red amaranth, were closest to the red wedge. The plants that made blue dye, such as woad and indigo, Japanese indigo and Indian indigo, were near the blue wedge. And then all of the many yellow dye plants like marigold and chamomile, dyer's chamomile and weld, were all on the yellow side. And around the stained glass color wheel, we then put paving stones. So the younger kids especially were thrilled to see this truck come with a huge crane to deliver 3 pallets of paving stones. It's a special set called Roman Villa, which is made to go in a circle. We had to very carefully level the center of the color wheel, and then we had gravel for drainage and sand on top of that, and leveled that, and then invited the grown-up community, the parents and administration and teachers and the board of directors, to come and help lay stones around the outside. We had a great work party doing that, with people coming throughout the morning. On our left is our director of education, and on our right, one of our board members that came to lay stones. And here it is, almost finished. And the last step of completing the outdoor classroom was putting together cement benches. And we had a volunteer parent, Lyndon, who's been quite involved in the garden, and he is now on the board of directors, helped a lot with this project and came and glued the cement benches together. And the garden's been, the outdoor classroom especially, has been used a lot, both by students using the garden as well as students just coming to sit in council with each other and have meetings, sitting in a circle. It's been well loved and well appreciated. We are so grateful to TD Trust, who made this project possible with their generous support of their Friends of the Environment Fund grant, as well as a lot of other community support. We had fencing donated from Buckerfields, a local farm supply store. Dinter Plant Nurseries donated soil and ongoing plant starts. We had donated cow manure from Sunshine Meadows, wood for raised planter boxes from Bavarian Canadian Mill, and additional community support came from the parent community, putting in countless hours of volunteering.